we're in Alabama's open date of the season, so it's a good time to reflect on the 3 games we've seen so far, plus take a look ahead and also talk some NASCAR with our good friend Larry McReynolds, a great fan of the Alabama Crimson Tide and, of course, a longtime NASCAR analyst in addition to his work before as a pit crew member and crew chief. And Larry, roll tide. It is great to have you on the show. We did this back in the spring, but it's great to have you with us during football season. How's everything going for you?
Well, I love this time of year. As we talked about football season, college football, we're well underway. Of course, our Crimson Tide, they've started off great, 3-0 before this off weekend. And if it's football season, college football season, that means it's playoff time for NASCAR for the Cup Series. So we're headed to Bristol, which means that's the cutoff race for this first round. So love this time of year for sure.
Let's start with some Crimson Tide football talk. We talked before in the spring about the transition from Coach Saban to Kalen DeBoer. Now we've gotten to see it in game-like settings. What have you made of this Alabama team through the first 3 weeks?
Well, I probably was more excited about the win at Wisconsin on the road, 42-10. You know, anytime you go to a college like Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, and play away, we know that's a tough environment. It's just like when a team comes to Tuscaloosa. But to know that our offense in 3 games have scored almost 150 points, our defense have held these first 3 teams to 26 points. And what I liked about the Wisconsin game, I felt like we cleaned up some stuff. We cleaned up some mistakes. If I go back to the first 2 games with Western Kentucky and South Florida at home in Tuscaloosa, I saw a lot of mistakes, a lot of penalties. That's something I felt like that plagued us last year. And quite honestly, I thought it contributed to the loss to Texas last year was all those false start penalties. And I think I was right in saying at Wisconsin this past weekend, we only had 3 penalties the entire game and 2 for false starts. So that's something we needed to clean up, and it looks like we did.
And great to see that offensive line against Wisconsin as well. It kind of looked like the version of the offensive line that we thought we were getting all fall camp.
No, I think we're playing good football now, especially at Wisconsin on both sides of the football. I'm glad we've got this off week. You know, we got beat up a little bit at Wisconsin, most notably Malachi Moore on the defense got hurt. Hopefully he'll be healthy when Georgia comes to town in 2 weeks. But I felt like special teams, offense, defense, running the football, passing the football. You never have a perfect football game, and I'm sure Coach DeBoer will tell you that. But I felt like that game against Wisconsin was pretty darn solid.
Great win for the Crimson Tide. Alabama now 3-0 on the season. We have the open date this week, and then Larry, it's Alabama against Georgia. Even though it's the first SEC game, and maybe with the 12-team playoff, there's more margin for error, but it's still going to have that huge game feeling once we're back at Saban Field on September 28th.
Well, we know every game is different, but I was pretty shocked and surprised how close Kentucky played Georgia. They showed that they are vulnerable, especially playing on the road. A 1-point win over Kentucky at Kentucky. So to me, that's a good sign. But the one thing that I feel strongly about is we can't start late against Georgia. We're going to have to jump on them early. We can't do what we did against South Florida. That will not work against Georgia because we know they're going to come out with guns a-blazing. We're going to have to jump on them hard early on offense. We're going to have to stop them on defense, and hopefully the crowd there in Tuscaloosa will play a role in that.
Have you liked this defense so far, especially been able to force some fumbles? We saw a couple interceptions by Keon Sabb in the first game.
Well, as I mentioned, 26 points combined against 3 teams. And I'm going to tell you, South Florida is not a bad football team. I think they get very underestimated when they come to town and play. But I feel like we're doing a good job of defending against the run. We're defending against the pass. But that's what they're going to have to do. Carson Beck, we know how dangerous that quarterback for Georgia can be, and it's going to take this defense. I always say, I've said it for years, when it comes to a college football team or really any football team, the offense scores the points, the defense wins the game.
They certainly do. And to tie this discussion back to NASCAR for just a moment, again, a huge transition in Alabama football going from Coach Saban to Kalen DeBoer. Looking back your NASCAR career, just the time you've been around motor racing, can you think of a similar situation, whether it was a long term driver that retired, or maybe a crew chief, someone that had been in a role like you had, or just a team had to go through a bit of a change like what Alabama's having to go through this year? Any notable examples stick out in your mind?
Well, I've probably seen it for a number of years in many regards, but probably one that comes to mind would be Jeff Gordon and Ray Evernham. You know, they were paired together for 1993, and when you look at the races they won, the championships they won together, I mean, they had several seasons where they had double-digit wins. But then Ray decided to make the move to Dodge and form Evernham Racing, and Robbie Loomis stepped in. There were several crew chiefs that Jeff went through. He obviously won a championship with Robbie Loomis, but I'm not sure we ever saw the magic that Ray and Jeff had. I could maybe even relate it to Jimmy Johnson and Chad Canals. When you look at all the races they won together, the 7 championships, they just finally, I think, kind of fizzled out. But I think that's a little bit of an artificial move because I think Jimmy was on the backside of his career. But probably the one that came to mind as you were asking me was the Jeff Gordon, Ray Evernham, all the success they had together. And Ray obviously went on to have success as an owner, and Jeff went on to have success winning another championship. But yeah, I think we've seen it several times.
That certainly is interesting. And then getting it to NASCAR today, what have you liked about the last few weeks and some of the racing action we've seen? As you mentioned, the playoff cutoff point is coming at Bristol, and it remains an extremely tight race.
I don't know that I've seen anything like this, but I think this first round has created this. We've never had a first round like Atlanta, a 1.5-mile super speedway. We just came off of a road course race at Watkins Glen. Watkins Glen has never been in the playoffs. We've only actually had one road course in the playoffs, the Charlotte Roval. And now we're going to a short track at Bristol where, based on the spring race, tire wear was the big story. And Goodyear, NASCAR, with some feedback from drivers, has decided to bring this same tire combination we ran there in the spring back there for this weekend. But it's almost been like it's not been the fastest cars that's been prevailing. When you look at our 16 drivers and 16 teams, both the Atlanta race and Watkins Glen, of the 16, 10 to 12 had some type of an issue, a penalty, or mistake. And that has cost them. That's what's got this so tight. Yeah, you've got Joey Logano that's locked in based on his win at Atlanta, but you've got like all these drivers right around the cut line. You got Chase Briscoe, Ty Gibbs, Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr., separated by 14 points headed to Bristol. So every stage point is going to be important at Bristol, and finishing just as high as you can. You think about it, Kyle Larson is just 26 points above the cut line. Denny Hamlin is 6 points below. I'm sure a lot of other people's bracket jives with mine. I had both those drivers going to the championship forward. I'm sure a lot of people had one or the other, maybe as the championship favorite. I don't know that we've ever seen it this tight headed into the cutoff race of round number 1 like we're seeing this year.
Does that speak to just the talent of the drivers that are in the mix right now? Maybe the model of the car being so similar across the board? Or where do you think that falls?
I think it's a combination. I think it's this car. We're in our 3rd year of this Gen 7 car. Just the win column alone speaks for itself. We have had 16 different winners in the first 28 races. Now, that also includes Austin Dillon and Chris Buescher, who just won at Watkins Glen. That's not in the playoffs. I would not be a bit surprised in these final 8 races to see another new winner. Think about it. Kyle Busch, he's still not won this year. Martin Truex Jr., that's in the playoffs, he's not won this year. So I think we could end up with 17 or 18 winners this year. But I think it goes back to what I also said. It's drivers and teams making mistakes. That is what has kept this so tight as we head to Bristol. Normally by now, even after 2 races, we have a couple of drivers that's already in a must-win situation, We don't have it. Harrison Burton, it's a vertical mountain for that 21 car. 20 points below the cut line, would have to leapfrog 5 drivers to get above the cut line. But you cannot even say he is in a must-win situation. Nobody really is right now.
Of course, the playoffs will continue. You mentioned Bristol coming up this weekend. And then in a few weeks, NASCAR action is returning here to Alabama to Talladega for what should be a fantastic weekend of racing coming up October 4th through the 6th. For fans that may be on the fence or haven't been to Talladega before, what would you tell them about the experience and what makes Talladega really stand out from the rest of the tracks in NASCAR?
There's no other track like it. The closest thing would be its sister track, Daytona International Speedway. But at Talladega, it's not unusual for us to have 40, 50 plus lead changes. And lead changes are only officially monitored at the start finish line. We'll have a lot more than that around the rest of the racetrack. But the bottom line is we're going to go there 36, 37, 38 drivers or teams, just like Daytona a few weeks ago. Every driver in that field, whether you're a playoff driver or a non-playoff driver, you feel like if you stay out of trouble, that you can win this race. I've always said it. At Talladega, like Daytona, if you're in it, you can win it. And there's a good chance we're going to go 188 laps, 500 miles, and we're probably not going to know who's going to win this thing till they come off turn 4, headed through the tri-oval with the checkered flag waving. Check that. We're probably not going to know who's going to win it till they go through the tri-oval, headed down to the start finish line with a checkered flag waving. It's such an unknown, and it's such a wild card race. They're going to be 3 wide, maybe 4 wide, 6, 7, 8 rows deep, and you'll see that this entire race.
With all that in mind, going back to your experience as a crew chief, what would give you more anxiety going into a race? A track like Daytona, Talladega, or a short track like Bristol that's coming up this weekend?
Both would give me anxiety, but for different reasons. Because at a short track like Bristol this weekend, even going back to Watkins Glen, or think about Kansas that kicks off the round of 12 before we head to Talladega, I knew that if a caution came out, I was going to have a decision to make. Do I pit? Do I stay out for track position? Do I think about 2 tires, 4 tires? Talladega gave me anxiety for a completely different reason. It's because once you know you make your final pit stop and you do not have to come back to pit road, you're good to go on fuel. Normally it's about fuel at Talladega. Fresh tires don't do you a whole lot. You almost become a race fan sitting on that pit box. You know it's up to your driver. It's up to the spotter that's taking care of that driver. And at Talladega, you can have the fastest car. You can have the best handling car. You can have perfect pit stops. Everything can be perfect for you, but you know that the outcome of your day, your destiny, is probably going to come down to what a driver in the field makes, a choice he makes, or maybe your driver makes a good decision or a bad decision that will either make your day go really good or go really bad.
Talking NASCAR and Alabama football, Larry McReynolds. Larry, of course, we know NASCAR, the playoffs are going to keep you busy over the next few weeks, but are you going to have a chance to come here to Tuscaloosa, maybe catch the Tide on the road coming up soon?
Well, I would love to. It's probably going to be after the NASCAR season, because even though we don't have the races right now, there's still a lot of things going on with Fox. I work with the local Fox affiliate here doing things for them over the weekend. But once we clear NASCAR, you better believe I'm going to try to get down there to Tuscaloosa. Or I'm not going to say if we make the playoffs, but when we make the playoffs, hopefully we'll get to one of those playoff games. You know, it's amazing, this SEC right now. I heard the guys this past Saturday on College Game Day. They said, and Nick Saban is again part of that and doing a phenomenal job. We miss him as our coach, but what a phenomenal job he's doing on College Game Day. He said it, those guys said it, Herb Street. They would not be a bit surprised to see 4, 5, maybe up to 6 SEC teams in the playoffs. And I think you just look at what's going on right now in the SEC, I don't think I'd be a bit surprised either.
No, I think they'd be some of the last teams standing. Well, Larry McReynolds, great to catch up with you. Hope to do this again down the road, maybe as the NASCAR playoffs come to a close. But thank you for all the time you've given us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Thank you for your time. Roll Tide.
No, I love catching up with you guys, talking Crimson Tide. I tell people all the time, they go, "What do you enjoy in life?" I said, "Look, there's four things in my life. There's God, there's my family, there's NASCAR, and there's Crimson Tide football. Outside of that, I don't venture too far out, and roll tide."